Jake Morrison sat in his small room on Luna Station and looked out the window at Earth below. The blue and green planet seemed so far away now, even though he had only been on the moon base for 3 weeks. He missed the heat of Brisbane and the sound of kookaburras laughing in the morning. Most of all, he missed being able to walk outside without wearing a spacesuit. The 20-year-old biology student from Queensland had dreamed of studying space science since he was 12. When the International Space Academy offered him a scholarship to spend a semester on Luna Station, he jumped at the chance. His parents had been worried about sending their only son so far from home, but Jake promised them he would be careful and stay out of trouble. Jake opened his desk drawer and smiled at the small containers inside. He had managed to sneak some of his favorite specimens past the customs officers when he left Earth. The officials had been more worried about weapons and drugs than a few bugs and plants from Australia. They had no idea what they were looking at when Jake showed them his collection of research samples for biology class. His roommate Danny was from Texas and thought Jake was crazy for keeping spiders and snakes in jars. Danny had nearly jumped out of his bed the first night when Jake showed him the funnel web spider he had caught behind his house in Brisbane. The poor American boy had never seen anything like it and refused to sleep in the same room until Jake promised to keep all the containers sealed tight. That morning, Jake received a message on his tablet from Professor Martinez, the head of the biology department. The message said that Jake had been selected to attend a special diplomatic meeting with alien visitors. Jake read the message 3 times to make sure he understood it correctly. Real aliens were coming to Luna Station, and somehow he had been chosen to represent human students at the meeting. The message explained that a species called the Vorthons had been watching Earth for several months. They wanted to make peaceful contact with humanity and learn about human culture. The aliens had specifically asked to meet with typical human students to better understand what Earth people were like. Professor Martinez wrote that Jake had been selected because he was polite, studious, and represented the kind of young person that would make a good impression on the alien visitors. Jake felt excited and nervous at the same time. He had always wondered if there was life on other planets, and now he was going to meet real aliens face to face. He spent the rest of the morning reading everything he could find about first contact protocols and diplomatic meetings. The Academy had strict rules about how to behave around alien visitors, and Jake did not want to embarrass himself or his school. At lunchtime, Jake met with the other students who had been selected for the meeting. There was Lisa Park from California, who studied engineering, and Ben Foster from New York, who was learning about space navigation. All 3 students had received similar messages from their professors. They were told to dress nicely, speak clearly, and answer any questions the aliens might have about human life and culture. Lisa seemed calm about the whole situation, but Ben was clearly nervous. He kept asking questions about what the aliens looked like and whether they were dangerous. Jake tried to reassure him that the Academy would not put students in danger. But honestly, Jake had no idea what to expect either. The meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock in Conference Room 7, which was one of the largest meeting spaces on Luna Station. Jake arrived 15 minutes early and found that the room had been decorated with flags from different Earth nations and pictures of human achievements in science and art. Someone had even placed fresh flowers on the table, though Jake wondered where they had found flowers on a moon base. At exactly 2 o'clock, the doors opened and the aliens entered the room. Jake had to stop himself from staring. The Vorthons were tall and thin, almost 3 meters high, with skin that looked like it was made of crystal or glass. They moved gracefully and made soft musical sounds when they spoke to each other in their own language. Their leader wore what appeared to be ceremonial robes covered in strange symbols. Ambassador Catherine introduced herself through a small device that translated her words into English. Her voice sounded like wind chimes when she spoke in her own language, and the translator made her sound very formal and polite. She explained that the Vorthons had traveled from a star system many light years away. Because they had detected signs of intelligent life on Earth, the ambassador told the students that the Vorthons belonged to something called the Galactic Council, which was made up of many different alien species who worked together to keep peace in the galaxy. She said that the Vorthons had been chosen to make first contact with humanity because they were known for being wise and gentle. Their job was to evaluate whether humans were ready to join the larger galactic community. Commander Zalthek, who appeared to be the military leader of the group, stepped forward and began asking questions about human society. He wanted to know about human government, human technology, and human history. His questions were polite, but Jake could tell that the alien was studying them very carefully, as if he was trying to determine whether humans were smart enough or peaceful enough to be trusted with advanced alien technology. The other Vorthon soldiers stood quietly around the room, but Jake noticed that they kept their hands near what looked like weapons on their belts. Even though the aliens claimed to be peaceful, they were clearly taking precautions in case something went wrong during the meeting. As the questions continued, Jake began to realize that the aliens had some very wrong ideas about Earth and humanity. They seemed to think that Earth was a peaceful, safe planet where humans lived comfortable lives without much danger or conflict. Commander Zalthek kept referring to Earth as a garden world and described humans as soft creatures who had never really faced serious challenges or threats. Jake felt his jaw clench when he heard these descriptions. Soft creatures. Garden world. These aliens clearly had no idea what Earth was really like, or what humans had to deal with every single day just to survive. They had been watching Earth from space, but they had completely missed the reality of life on the most dangerous planet in the galaxy. That was when Jake decided that these aliens needed a proper education about Earth and humanity. He reached into his backpack and pulled out one of his specimen containers. It was time to show these visitors what a real garden world looked like. Jake held up the small glass container and watched as all 12 Vorthon soldiers immediately tensed up. Inside the jar, a brown spider about the size of a 50-cent coin moved slowly around the bottom. The creature looked harmless enough to most people, but Jake knew better. He had caught this particular specimen in his backyard shed just 2 days before leaving for Luna Station. Garden world, you say? Jake said, his Australian accent becoming thicker as his amusement grew. Mate, I think you might have Earth confused with some other planet. This little beauty here is a Sydney funnel web spider. One bite from this fellow can kill a full-grown human in about 15 minutes, maybe less if you're unlucky. Ambassador Catherine stepped back from the table, her crystalline features shifting in what Jake assumed was concern or fear. Her translator device made strange crackling sounds as it struggled to process Jake's casual tone while he described something so deadly. Surely you are making a joke, the ambassador said, her musical voice now carrying a higher pitch. Your species would not coexist with such dangerous predators. The scans from our observation ships showed that Earth is populated by peaceful creatures living in harmony with nature. Jake laughed and shook his head. Peaceful creatures living in harmony, right? Your scans must have missed a few things. He set the spider container on the table and reached back into his bag. Let me show you some more examples of our peaceful garden world. The next container held what looked like a small octopus, no bigger than Jake's fist. Its skin was a beautiful golden color with bright blue rings that seemed to pulse with their own light. Even the Vorthons had to admit it was a stunning creature, and several of them leaned forward to get a better look. This is a blue-ringed octopus, Jake explained, holding the container up to the light. Pretty little thing, isn't it? These rings light up when it gets excited or feels threatened. It carries enough venom to kill 26 adult humans in about 10 minutes. Oh, and there's no antidote. Once you get bitten, you just have to hope your body can fight off the poison before it stops your heart. Commander Zalthek made a sound that the translator could not convert into English. His hand moved instinctively toward his weapon, but he stopped himself when he realized that Jake was holding the dangerous creature in a simple glass jar, acting as if it was no more threatening than a pet goldfish. But wait, there's more, Jake continued, clearly enjoying the effect he was having on his alien audience. He pulled out a third container, this one holding what appeared to be a dry brown snake about 1 meter long. This is an inland taipan. We call it the fierce snake back home. It's the most venomous land snake on planet Earth. One bite contains enough poison to kill 100 adult humans. We find these all over Australia. Ben Foster, the American student from New York, had gone completely pale and was staring at Jake as if he had never seen him before. Lisa Park looked fascinated but kept her distance from the table. The Vorthan soldiers were now backing toward the walls of the conference room, their weapons halfway drawn. Jake was not finished. He reached into a small plastic bag and pulled out what looked like an ordinary leaf, brown and dried like something that had fallen from a tree in autumn. He held it carefully by the stem, making sure not to touch the surface of the leaf itself. "This," Jake said, "is from a plant we call the Jimpy Jimpy. It grows wild in the rainforests of Queensland. If you touch this leaf with your bare skin, you will be in agony for months. The pain is so bad that people sometimes kill themselves rather than deal with it. The poison gets into your skin and stays there, causing burning pain every time you touch the affected area or even when cold water hits it." Ambassador Catherine was now making continuous high-pitched sounds that her translator was interpreting as distress calls. She kept looking from Jake to his collection of deadly specimens and back again, as if she could not believe that this young human was casually handling things that could kill him. "The interesting thing about the Jimpy Jimpy," Jake continued, in a conversational tone, "is that some of our native animals have learned to eat it without getting hurt. But for humans, just brushing against it accidentally can put you in the hospital. There are stories of people who touched it during World War II and were still feeling pain 30 years later." Commander Zalthek finally found his voice. "How? Do you survive on such a planet? How does your entire species not die out from these creatures?" Jake grinned, and several of the Vorthans stepped further back when they saw his expression. There was something predatory in that smile, something that reminded them of hunters from their own homeworld. "We survive because we're tougher than you think," Jake said. "We learn from childhood which plants to avoid and which animals can kill us. Every Australian kid knows not to reach under logs without looking first, not to swim in certain rivers during crocodile season, and definitely not to pick up pretty blue-ringed octopuses they find in tide pools." He gestured to his collection of specimens. "And these are just from my backyard and the local beach. This is what we consider normal everyday wildlife in Australia. I haven't even started talking about our sharks yet, or our crocodiles, or our jellyfish that can kill you just by floating into you while you're swimming." Lisa Park decided to join the conversation. "Are you telling them about drop bears yet?" she asked with a straight face. Every human in the room went quiet. The Vorthans looked confused by the sudden silence and the way all the humans were now looking at each other with barely concealed amusement. "Drop bears," Commander Zalthek repeated slowly, his translator making the words sound ominous. Jake's grin got even wider. "Oh, mate, you really don't want to know about drop bears. Let's just say they're the reason why smart people don't go camping alone in certain parts of Australia." The Vorthan military commander was now visibly shaking. His crystalline skin had changed color, shifting from its original pale blue to a darker shade that Jake assumed indicated fear or stress. "What?" the commander asked in a whisper, "is a drop bear?" Jake looked around the room at his fellow humans, all of whom were now smiling with the same predatory expression. Even Ben, who had been nervous about meeting aliens, was now enjoying the show. "Well," Jake said slowly, "since you ask so nicely, I suppose I could tell you about drop bears. But first, let me show you a few more examples of our peaceful garden world wildlife." I brought pictures. Jake pulled out his tablet and began swiping through his photo collection. The first image that appeared on the screen made Commander Zalthek make a sound like breaking glass. It was a picture of a massive saltwater crocodile, at least 6 meters long, with its jaws wide open, showing rows of teeth like railroad spikes. "This is just a medium-sized saltwater crocodile," Jake said casually. "They can grow up to 7 meters long and have the strongest bite force of any animal on Earth. They're perfectly happy to eat humans, and they're smart enough to learn your daily routine and wait for you in the right spot. We have thousands of them in northern Australia." The Vorthan soldiers were now pressed against the walls of the conference room, as far from Jake and his tablet as they could get. Ambassador Catherine was making continuous musical distress calls that her translator was giving up trying to convert into words. Jake swiped to the next photo, which showed a great white shark breaching the water with a seal in its mouth. Australia has more species of deadly sharks than anywhere else on Earth. This great white is actually one of the smaller predators in our waters. We also have tiger sharks, bull sharks, and something called a goblin shark that looks like it came from your worst nightmares. Ben Foster had stopped looking pale and was now watching the aliens' reactions with growing amusement. Jake, show them the picture of the box jellyfish. Oh, right, the box jellyfish, Jake said, swiping to find the image. When it appeared on screen, it looked almost beautiful, a translucent, cube-shaped creature with long, trailing tentacles that seemed to dance in the water. This little fellow is one of the most venomous creatures on the planet. The tentacles can be up to 3 meters long, and they're covered in millions of tiny darts full of poison. If you get wrapped up in the tentacles, you'll be dead in minutes. The pain is so intense that most people go into shock immediately. Lisa Park had been watching from the doorway and decided to join the educational session. Did you mention the blue bottles yet, or the irukandji? I was getting to those, Jake replied. Blue bottles are these jellyfish that wash up on our beaches. By the millions. Getting stung by one feels like being whipped with a red-hot wire. And the irukandji jellyfish is so small you can barely see it, but its sting can cause something called irukandji syndrome. Your blood pressure goes crazy, you feel like you're going to die, and some people actually do die from heart failure. Commander Zalthek interrupted with what sounded like a plea. How do you recreation on such a planet? How do you swim in waters filled with such creatures? Jake laughed. We swim anyway. We just learn to check for stingers, avoid certain areas during jellyfish season, and hope for the best. Most Australians get stung by blue bottles at least once in their lives. It's like a rite of passage. He swiped to another photo, this one showing a snake coiled on a rock in the sunshine. It was beautiful, with diamond patterns along its back and intelligent-looking eyes. This is an eastern brown snake. It's the second most venomous land snake in the world, and it's aggressive. If you corner one of these, it will chase you. They can move faster than most humans can run. The Vorthans were now making sounds that needed no translation. Pure terror has the same tone in any language. Jake continued his presentation, showing photos of redback spiders hiding in mailboxes, huntsman spiders the size of dinner plates, and something called a mouse spider that looked like it belonged in a horror movie. With each new image, the aliens pressed themselves further against the walls and made increasingly distressed noises. The thing you have to understand, Jake said, warming to his subject, is that all of these creatures are just part of normal life in Australia. Kids learn to shake out their shoes before putting them on because spiders like dark places. We check under toilet seats because redback spiders love to hide there. We look before we reach into mailboxes or garden sheds. Lisa nodded in agreement. In California, we worry about earthquakes and wildfires. In Australia, the wildlife is actively trying to kill you every single day. That's not even counting our plants, Jake added. He showed them a photo of what looked like an ordinary tree with heart-shaped leaves. This is a manchineel tree. The sap is so poisonous that standing under it during rain can cause blisters on your skin. Eating the fruit will kill you, and burning the wood produces toxic smoke that can blind you. Ben finally joined the conversation. Wait, you guys have trees that can kill you just by standing near them? We have lots of plants that can kill you, Jake replied. The castor oil plant produces ricin, which is one of the most deadly poisons known to science. We have stinging trees that can cause pain for months. Even some of our mushrooms are deadly. Eat the wrong one and your liver shuts down. Commander Zalthek made another attempt to understand. But surely your weather is mild. Surely your planet's climate is stable and safe. Jake's grin became absolutely predatory. Our weather, right. Let me tell you about Australian weather. He swiped to a photo of a massive cyclone taken from space. This is Cyclone Yasi, winds over 280 kilometers per hour. It destroyed entire towns. We get several of these every year during cyclone season. The next photo showed a wall of red dust stretching across the horizon like a tsunami made of dirt. This is a dust storm. They can be hundreds of kilometers wide and completely bury cities. The dust gets into everything, your lungs, your eyes, your house. Sometimes these storms are so big they're visible from space. Jake showed them pictures of hailstones the size of cricket balls that had smashed car windshields and put holes in roof tiles. He showed them footage of lightning storms that lasted for hours, with bolts striking the ground hundreds of times per minute. He showed them photos of bushfires that had burned areas larger than some countries. Our weather tries to kill us just as much as our wildlife does, Jake explained. We have droughts that last for years, floods that wash away entire towns, and heat waves that can reach 50 degrees Celsius in the shade. Oh, and we have something called the doldrums, where the wind just stops completely for weeks at a time. Ambassador Catherine finally managed to make her translator work long enough to ask a question. How does your species survive such conditions? What evolutionary adaptations allow you to live in such an environment? Jake looked at the terrified aliens and realized they still did not understand the most important thing about humans and Earth. They thought humans were victims of their harsh environment, struggling to survive against impossible odds. They had no idea that humans were not the prey on Earth. Humans were the predators. Evolution, Jake said slowly, is an interesting word to use. See, the thing about humans is that we didn't just adapt to survive on Earth, we adapted to dominate it. Every single creature I've shown you, every deadly plant, every dangerous weather pattern, we figured out how to fight back. Jake stood up from his chair, and the movement made every Vorthan in the room flinch backward. He was not trying to be threatening, but something about the way he moved reminded the aliens of apex predators from their own homeworld. There was a confidence in his posture that spoke of a creature that had never been prey. Let me tell you what humans did when we encountered all these deadly creatures, Jake said, his voice taking on a storytelling tone that somehow made his words even more frightening to the alien visitors. When we found venomous snakes, we didn't run away and hide. We caught them, we studied them. We figured out how to milk their venom and turn it into medicine. He pulled up another photo on his tablet, this one showing a scientist in protective gear holding a deadly taipan while extracting venom from its fangs. We use snake venom to make antivenom that saves lives. We've turned our most deadly predators into sources of healing. That's what humans do. We take things that want to kill us and we make them work for us instead. Commander Zalthek was now making a continuous low whining sound that needed no translation. The concept of deliberately catching deadly predators for scientific purposes was beyond his understanding. And our spiders, Jake continued, we didn't just avoid them. We studied their webs and learned how to make materials stronger than steel. We looked at how they hunt and develop better strategies for our own hunting. Some humans even eat certain species of spiders as food. Lisa Park nodded and added her own contribution to the discussion. In some parts of Earth, people eat scorpions, snakes, and insects. We figured out that if something is trying to kill us, we might as well see if it tastes good. The Vorthans made collective sounds of horror at this revelation. The idea of eating venomous creatures was so alien to their peaceful herbivore culture that their translators struggled to process the concept. Jake was just getting started. When we encountered sharks, we didn't stay out of the water. We built cages and went down to observe them in their own environment. We tagged them to track their movements. Some humans even swim with them for fun, without any protection except a face mask and flippers. He showed them a photo of a human diver swimming alongside a massive great white shark, both creatures seemingly at peace with each other. This person is doing this by choice, for entertainment. We call it extreme sports. Ben Foster laughed at the aliens' expressions. Wait until you hear about our other extreme sports. We throw ourselves off mountains with nothing but fabric wings. We strap ourselves to rockets and blast into space. We dive to the bottom of the ocean in metal cans just to see what's down there. Our entertainment, Jake said, is based on danger. We watch people fight each other for sport. We race vehicles at speeds that can kill us instantly if something goes wrong. We climb mountains that are so high the air is too thin to breathe, just because they're there. Ambassador Catherine managed to activate her translator long enough to ask, "Why do you deliberately seek out danger? What purpose does this serve?" Jake thought about the question for a moment. "Because it's fun," he said simply. "Humans get bored easily. When life becomes too safe and predictable, we create our own challenges. We compete with each other to see who can do the most dangerous things and survive." At that moment, Captain Ryan Hayes entered the conference room to check on the diplomatic meeting. The ex-Marine took one look at the terrified aliens huddled against the walls and Jake standing in the middle of the room with his tablet, and immediately understood what was happening. "Are you giving our guests a cultural education?" Captain Hayes asked with a slight smile. "Just explaining a few things about Earth," Jake replied innocently. Captain Hayes nodded and turned to address the Vorthans directly. "I hope our students are being informative. It's important that you understand what humans are capable of before we discuss any formal diplomatic arrangements." Commander Zolthek found his voice long enough to ask, "What do you mean by what humans are capable of?" Captain Hayes's expression became serious. "Well, for starters, we're the only species that discovered nuclear fission and immediately thought to use it as a weapon. We built bombs powerful enough to destroy entire cities, and then we built bigger ones just to make sure we could destroy multiple cities at once." The Vorthans went completely silent. Even their involuntary distress calls stopped as they processed this information. "We're also the only species that looked at the vacuum of space and decided to explore it," Captain Hayes continued. "We strapped ourselves to controlled explosions and launched ourselves off our planet just to see what was out there. We've sent humans to our moon, we've built permanent stations in orbit, and we're planning missions to other planets in our solar system." Jake decided to add his own perspective. "And we did all of this while living on a planet that's constantly trying to kill us. Every human achievement happened despite our environment being actively hostile to our survival." Lisa Park picked up the thread. "We didn't wait for our planet to become safer before we started exploring and inventing. We just accepted that death was always a possibility and kept going anyway." "That's the thing about humans," Captain Hayes said, looking directly at Ambassador Catherine. "We don't see danger as something to avoid. We see it as something to overcome. Every challenge makes us stronger, every threat makes us more creative, and every attempt to kill us just makes us more determined to survive and thrive." Jake pulled up one final photo on his tablet. It showed Earth from space, looking peaceful and blue and beautiful. "This is what your observation ships saw when they looked at our planet. A beautiful blue world that looks calm and safe from a distance." He swiped to the next image, which was a composite showing all of Earth's active weather systems, volcanic eruptions and natural disasters happening simultaneously. The planet looked like it was covered in violent storms, fires, and chaos. "This is what Earth actually looks like most of the time," Jake said. "And this is where humans evolved. This is what we call home." The Vorthans stared at the image in complete silence. Their advanced civilization had never encountered anything like it, a planet so actively hostile to life that it seemed impossible that any intelligent species could have developed there. But humans had not just developed on this nightmare world, they had thrived on it. They had conquered it. They had turned its dangers into advantages and its threats into opportunities, and now these terrifyingly adaptable creatures were looking outward, toward the stars, with the same predatory confidence they had used to dominate their own planet. "Commander." Zolthek finally understood why his species' observations had been so wrong. They had been looking for a peaceful, primitive species suitable for guidance and protection. Instead, they had found the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. Ambassador Catherine was frantically tapping her communication device, trying to establish contact with the Vorthan fleet orbiting Earth's moon. Her crystalline fingers moved in rapid patterns across the device's surface, but she was having trouble concentrating because Jake was still talking about human achievements in his casual, terrifying way. Oh, and we domesticated wolves, Jake said, as if he was discussing the weather. Thousands of years ago, we looked at these pack-hunting predators with massive teeth and thought, you know what, these would make great pets, so we bred them into dogs, and now they live in our houses and sleep in our beds. The Vorthen security detail made a collective sound of disbelief. The concept of voluntarily bringing predators into their homes was so alien to their peaceful culture that several of them began backing toward the exit. We also domesticated horses, Lisa Park added helpfully. These are large animals that can kick hard enough to break bones, but we decided to climb on their backs and ride them into battle. For fun, we still do something called rodeo, where humans try to stay on the backs of angry bulls and horses that are actively trying to throw them off. Ben Foster was now fully enjoying the aliens' reactions and decided to contribute his own knowledge. In some parts of Earth, humans raise fighting roosters and bet on which one will win. We've turned animal aggression into entertainment. Captain Hayes watched the Vorthens growing more agitated and decided to provide some additional context. I should mention that everything these students are telling you represents normal, everyday human culture. This isn't our military speaking or our most dangerous individuals. These are just regular college students describing life on Earth. Commander Zolthek finally managed to speak. But surely your military forces must be different. Surely your warriors are more civilized than your civilian population. Captain Hayes smiled, and there was something predatory in that expression that made the Vorthen step back even further. Actually, our military is trained to be much more dangerous than our civilians. We teach our soldiers to be efficient killers, and we give them weapons that can destroy targets from hundreds of kilometers away. Jake decided to elaborate on human military history. We've been having wars for thousands of years. Not just small conflicts, but massive battles involving millions of people. We've gotten very good at it. We've invented chemical weapons, biological weapons and nuclear weapons. We've created machines that can kill hundreds of people in minutes. But we've also created something called the Geneva Convention, Lisa added. We made rules about how to conduct warfare humanely, because even our violence has to be civilized. The Vorthens looked confused by this concept. Commander Zolthek asked, "You created rules for how to kill each other properly." "Exactly," Captain Hayes replied. "We recognized that conflict was inevitable, so we decided to make it as fair and humane as possible. We have rules about protecting civilians, treating prisoners well, and avoiding unnecessary suffering." Jake pulled up another photo on his tablet. This one showing a field hospital where soldiers from opposing sides were being treated by the same medical staff. Even in war, we try to save lives. Our combat medics will treat enemy soldiers alongside their own forces. We believe that showing mercy makes us stronger, not weaker. Ambassador Catherine finally managed to establish communication with her fleet. The conversation was brief and conducted in rapid, musical Vorthen language, but the humans could tell from her tone that she was reporting something urgent and frightening. "We must depart immediately," the ambassador announced to the room. "This diplomatic mission is concluded." Jake looked disappointed. "But I haven't even told you about our music yet. We have something called heavy metal, where we play instruments so loud they can cause permanent hearing damage, and we do it on purpose because we like how it sounds." The Vorthens began moving toward the exit in a coordinated retreat, but Jake was not finished with his cultural education. "And our food," he called after them. "We eat plants that evolved capsaicin specifically to prevent animals from eating them, and we thought the burning sensation was so pleasant that we bred them to be even hotter. We have contests to see who can eat the spiciest food without crying." Commander Zolthek paused at the doorway and turned back. "You consume toxins for pleasure." "We consume lots of things for pleasure," Ben replied. "We drink ethanol, which is literally a poison, because it makes us feel relaxed. We smoke dried leaves that we know will damage our lungs. We eat fermented foods that are technically rotting," Lisa nodded in agreement. "We also drink beverages with caffeine, which is an insecticide that plants produce to kill bugs, but we found it helps us stay awake and alert." Captain Hayes decided to add one final observation. The students haven't mentioned our space program yet. We've been launching rockets filled with explosives off our planet for decades just to see how far we can go. We've sent robotic probes to every planet in our solar system, and we're planning to send humans to Mars within the next few years. Mars is a dead planet with no atmosphere and radiation that would kill most life forms, Jake explained. We want to go there anyway, just to prove we can survive anywhere. The Vorthans were now completely silent, processing the full implications of what they had learned. They had come to Earth expecting to find a primitive species that needed guidance and protection. Instead, they had discovered apex predators who had turned their hostile environment into a source of strength and innovation. Ambassador Catherine made one final attempt at diplomatic protocol. Perhaps we could schedule another meeting at a later time when our cultural experts have had time to process this information. Jake brightened up. That would be great. Next time I could bring some of my other specimens. I've got a few samples of our Australian jellyfish that I think you'd find really interesting. The collective sound of terror from the Vorthan delegation echoed through the conference room as they fled toward their shuttle bay. Within an hour, the entire Vorthan fleet had departed Luna Station. Their final transmission to the Galactic Council was brief but comprehensive. Species designation, human. Planet designation, Earth. Classification, Deathworld Class 12. Recommendation, immediate quarantine protocols. These creatures have weaponized natural selection and consider it recreational activity. They voluntarily coexist with apex predators and consume biological toxins for entertainment purposes. The transmission continued with increasingly frantic details about human behavior that the Vorthan observers had documented. Human juveniles are sent to educational facilities on the continent designated Australia, which appears to be a concentrated repository of the planet's most lethal organisms. This is considered normal childhood development. Adult humans engage in activities called extreme sports where they deliberately expose themselves to mortal danger for psychological satisfaction. Jake Morrison packed up his specimen collection and headed back to his dormitory room, completely unaware that he had just caused the first galactic-wide panic in recorded history. His roommate Danny was waiting for him with questions about how the alien meeting had gone. It went pretty well, Jake said, setting his containers back in their drawer. They seemed really interested in learning about Australian wildlife. I think I gave them a good overview of what Earth is like. Danny looked at the jars full of deadly creatures and shook his head. Man, I still can't believe you brought all that stuff to space? What if something had gone wrong during launch? Jake shrugged. These little guys are perfectly safe as long as you don't do anything stupid. Besides, I figured the aliens might want to see some real examples of Earth life, not just pictures and descriptions. 3 days later, Professor Martinez called Jake into his office with a confused expression on his face. Jake, I've received some very strange communications from the Galactic Council. They seem to think that Earth is some kind of dangerous military stronghold populated by warrior creatures. Jake looked puzzled. That's weird. Did you tell them that we're mostly just students and scientists here on Luna Station? I tried to explain that, Professor Martinez replied, but they kept asking about something called drop bears and whether our educational system really involves exposing children to venomous predators. Oh, that, Jake said with understanding. Yeah, I might have mentioned drop bears during the cultural exchange. And I showed them some pictures of the wildlife back home. Professor Martinez stared at his student. Jake, what exactly did you tell these aliens about Earth? Jake thought back to the meeting and tried to remember the highlights. Just normal stuff about Australia, really. The spiders, snakes, jellyfish, crocodiles, sharks, plants that can kill you, weather patterns, that sort of thing. I wanted them to understand that Earth isn't the peaceful garden world they thought it was. The professor put his head in his hands. Jake, the Galactic Council has issued something called a unanimous prohibition of contact order. Earth has been reclassified from a primitive garden world to a quarantine zone with the notation, approach at own risk. Really? Jake asked, genuinely surprised. That seems like an overreaction. I mean, Australia is dangerous, but it's not that bad once you know what to look out for. Professor Martinez looked up at his student with a mixture of admiration and horror.